Hi there, you've been really patient. What's your name?
My name's Raven.
Raven?
Yeah.
And where are you from?
I'm from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada.
Oh, wow. I like
Canadian town.
You have a authentically Canadian question for...
Probably not, but... what was, I guess, this is to anyone, what was your worst type of day job? Like, which one is just, you just hate?
This is going to be good.
I had to fly a spaceship for 7 years and nobody ever listened to me, even though I was right all the time.
I worked in a factory shrink wrapping knives. And the game was, everybody knew that you were cutting yourself constantly. So the game was trying to not reveal that you had cut yourself and sneak to the first aid box, open it, and get a Band-Aid without any of the other shrink wrappers noticing that you were trailing blood.
You're making that up. There's no way that's true.
Yeah.
That is
sounds like a dream.
That is absolutely.
I thought you were going to say the game was to sneak a bloody knife into a shrink wrap box so that people, oh my God!
Sometimes I would put a hand in the shrink wrapping machine so you'd get like knife set, shrink wrap, bloody hand.
Molly, worst job?
Me?
Yeah, you.
For, I want to say, 6 years of my life, I was made to volunteer at a Bible camp because my mom was the music director. So I was corralling a lot of new children and doing sign language songs about Jesus. And that's where I get my instinct as a performer, I guess.
What's Jesus in sign language, in American Sign Language?
That's the...
Oh, the stigmata. Oh, really? Cool.
Wow!
You know what? That's heavy.
You're not joking, right? That's for real?
It's true.
That makes me so happy.
I'm a C-H, I'm a C-H-R-I-S-T-I-A-N. C-H-R-I-S-T-N-H-E-A-R-T. And I L-I-V-E-E-T-E-R-N-A-L-L-Y.
Marion Cole is singing it along with you. You know this one?
No, my parents were also music directors at church camps, though.
Oh.
We have more in common than we thought.
Could you do it in sign?
No, not in sign language. I can do some of them in Spanish, though. No.
You realize you've just asked her to sing a little bit. You've covered this ground, John Roderick.
I am Stacy's mom!
Vi Hart, worst job?
I might be the only... I have never had a real job.
Yeah!
Okay, next.
I refused. I mean...
Well, that's quite a feather in your hair, then.
I wanted to do stuff, and I'm absolutely stubborn, like many of us. You have to go for it, and maybe I kind of went for it earlier than most of us.
Well done.
Good on you. Chris, worst job? Worst day job?
The worst job I ever had, I only had for 2 days, and it was at a lampshade factory. This is for real. The guy said, "Welcome to JoCo." I said, "Fuck you." I actually went from there to go work at a place that made transducers that were put into the invisible fence things. You know how they keep dogs in yards with invisible fence?
Yeah.
That job sucked too. So, yeah.
How long did you work at the invisible fence transducer?
2 summers, and I got a dollar an hour raise the second summer.
Cool. All right. Yeah, give it up. Give it up. That's good. Jamie?
I was the food taster for a European monarch who was often the target of poisoning. That one was pretty rough. Also, at one point, I delivered subpoenas.
Really?
Somewhat.
What were your tricks?
One of those 2 jobs was real.
I got that, Jonathan Colton. What did Jonathan
Sounds like penis to me.
Paul, worst job?
I would like to cede my time to my fellow Paul, who probably has a much more interesting story than I do.
Oh, well, that's where you're wrong. The worst job I ever had was telemarketing. It was horrible. We did movie surveys where we weren't selling anything, and you had to say that a million times so people wouldn't hang up on you. We just did surveys, and telemarketing is just an industry that is in a bubble of hatred. People hate you, you hate the people you work with, they all hate you. It was miserable. It's the only job I ever had where I just left without saying a word to anyone. I just
walked off?
I went in one day and I got my check, and it was payday, and I picked up my check and I just looked in the phone room and I was just like, no. And I just walked out. That was it. It was horrible. But listen, when you get a telemarketer, please be a little kind. Try to get off as politely as possible. They're not pulling all the strings, the people that are making the phone calls. It's not like, you know what, I feel like doing this. Just kind of, just try to be a little, sorry before you hang up on them.
Paul, I have a question. Just to follow
I'll allow it.
So I did some telemarketing in my time, and I agree, it's awful hateful. And for a long time after that, I would be really polite getting off the phone.
Yes.
Because I respected their humanity.
Yes.
But then I began to feel, and maybe this is just me going Dark Phoenix again, that I'm just wasting their time. Don't they do you know what I mean?
Yes, but I think what I do is...
By treating them like a human, I'm just wasting their time.
Yes, but I think you can...
If I just hang up, then they know, they're on to the next thing.
But you can hang up with polite language still. You know what I mean?
All right.
You can say something like, I'm sorry, I just don't have the time, thank you, and hang up.
Okay.
Which is, it makes a huge difference.
I guess that was wrong.
Hodgman's been doing them a favor by being like, fuck you.
Well, no, not being mean, but just click.
Yeah.
Yeah. Comedy hang up. That's right. Okay, I learned my lesson.
How long were you in that line of work, Paul?
That was 6 months.
6 months.
And it felt like my entire life.
Okay.
My worst job was probably the record label job. I mean, I had a lot of terrible temp jobs, but that's not even interesting to talk about. The record label job was bad because I was the assistant to the director of A&R at this small label that was like weird classical crossover and adult contemporary stuff. Chant, yeah, there was a record called Chant, which was Gregorian chant that for no reason anybody could figure went double platinum.
My mom has that record.
Your mom has that record, yeah.
It was the last record she ever bought.
That was happening when I first arrived, and and everybody was like gleefully counting their money and couldn't figure out why it was going double platinum, and it was just the most perfect representation of what the music industry was in those days.
Well, selling music to people who don't like music is the biggest part of the music
well,
business.
yeah, it's bizarre.
Or was.
And then the other thing that was awful about that job was that I was really bad at it. I'm not a details-oriented person, and so my job was like my boss was crazy, and I had to sort of keep track of all of the things that he was not paying attention to, and I was really bad at that. And so I would forget to write things down, and I would forget to order things, and then people would say, hey, where's Tony today? Where's your boss today? And I'd be like, I don't know where he is.
In that voice?
Yeah, I was really just not very good at it, and so I did it for a year and was miserable, and they hated me. And then at the end of that year, we had a talk, and they said, maybe you should leave to pursue other interests. And I was asked to quit. So I did.
Did you do a lot of blow?
Oh yeah, there's a ton of blow. Ton of blow. On the plus side.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Can I say briefly also, I was a waiter, and I would just like to state for the record that people who are awful to waiters are the scum of the earth.
Agreed.
I'm just trying to save them their time. I'm just trying to save their time.
Corollary to that, bad waiters should be set on fire.
Transfer, worst day job.
On paper, my worst day job was I removed staples from medical documents for 4 months.
I love jobs like that, man.
In a very small room to prepare them for microfilming. All I did was remove staples. I was not allowed to listen to the radio, or I was not allowed to do anything else. And and this, I know, but as I said, on paper, this is the worst job.
But you know what?
Freakishly, my hand started, the muscles in between my thumb and forefinger started getting enormous. I started looking, over the course of the 4 months, by the end of it, I looked like
a fiddler crab.
I looked like a lobster. This hand got so distorted that I actually started doing it with the other hand. But that is only my worst job on paper. The actual worst job I ever had was also in a very small room, working for Random House Publishing, which sounds prestigious. My boss was a cocaine addict. I was actually already in the band They Might Be Giants, and I would not work overtime. And it was very strange. I worked in what had previously been the actual broom closet of Random House. Much of my time was built. I was designing in-store displays that were larger than the room I was in. Yeah, and you can actually see some of my work. I did touch up on Dr. Seuss displays, which was strictly forbidden. Dr. Seuss was still alive, but he was very, very old and couldn't do the artwork himself, so they just lied to him, and which was not a problem with my coke-addled boss. But if you go into if there are still bookstores when we get back, there's like a 6-foot display of the Cat in the Hat with his arm. It was taken from like the original Cat in the Hat book where he's putting his arm around some kids, and we took that and he's putting his arm around this giant bookshelf, and I drew like the hand and the feet, and it's very, very poorly done. But the thing is, actually laying it out, this thing is, I was in a room, like I could touch both walls, like here, this way, rolling out the mechanicals. It was an unbelievably shitty job.
Plus, it was really dirty there because the Random House had nowhere to keep brooms anymore.
Right. It was filthy. But the punchline was that while I had that job, there was an article about They Might Be Giants in People magazine, which my boss saw, and then she fired me. Because that was why I couldn't work nights.
Oh right. You weren't telling your boss the reason?
I had learned a couple years earlier that it was not a good idea to tell people that you're in a rock band.
Yeah, because then they associate that with like drugs and cocaine.
If you were a freelancer, they associate it with you not being able to work deadlines. Right. Which is what was true. Which is why she fired me. That, and I hated her. And her cocaine.
I really want to know whether Put Your Hand Inside the Puppet Head is at all related to the lobster claw experience.
I had that job then. That was the job I had.
This is right there. I like that. Nice. Roderick, have you ever had a day job? Didn't mean to catch you off guard there, bro.
My worst job was as a bulldozer and sluice box mucker in a
sluice box mucker?
I was a sluice box mucker.
What is a sluice box?
Really dirty spooners.
I know everyone knows what a sluice box is.
It was on a gold mine up in a little town called Arctic Circle, Alaska.
Fake.
No, it's 100% real. And what a sluice box is that there's a river, and they build a long box with many little
sluices.
Little levels, and they.
We got a miner in the audience.
And then so it's basically strip mining. So you take the bulldozer and you carve mud out of the side of the riverbank, and you bulldoze the mud into the top of the sluice box, and then you shoot water down it, and it washes all the dirt and rocks and mud, and then the gold is caught in the little riffles.
And then you had to muck the gold.
Well, and then I was the low guy on the totem pole, and my job, so everything's covered with not mud but muck. like the bulldozers would get so mucked up that you couldn't even drive. And these are D9 Caterpillars, like massive.
Oh yeah, the D9 Caterpillar.
You don't use D10s for that? That was like a D10 job to me.
Yeah, D10 is too big to sink into the river. But so the D9 was maximize the largeness of the bulldozer while still being somewhat mobile. And then
it's a sweet spot.
So every day at the end of the day, or throughout the day, I was keeping these things running by demucking them, and then I would muck the sluice.
Demucking them with like a high pressure hose?
I had a high pressure hose. I had like
620, 621 on that.
I had a pitchfork. I had a hoe. I had all these implements.
So you're saying
That was the last thing.
you're saying anything that needed mucking got mucked that day?
If it needed mucking, I was the mucker. And I'm in hip waders, or and sometimes chest waders, because I'm up to here in like.
You don't have to say it.
Yeah.
We know.
I'm in the muck.
Yeah.
And I got no respect. All the other miners are miners, miners.
Sure.
Show them respect. Stand up and give them a round of applause. This dude was mucking your gold. Show him some respect. All that bling you got on. You can't do muck if it wasn't for people like John Roderick. Storm, worst job.
Wait, before, can I just add something really quickly? I'd just like to say thank you because I have believed for a long time that we should switch to the gold standard.
Okay, that is mine.
Run, Paul! Run, Paul! Run, Paul!
Storm, worst job.
As terrible as being a janitor at a bowling alley was, and as crippling as spending as an entire summer as a salesman at a Chrysler Plymouth dealer was.
We got caught with our pants down!
That was how it was. The worst, I worked at a insurance industry trade association. This was shortly after college. Computers existed, but they hadn't arrived at this particular association. And I worked in the center of a building where not only was there no light, but no light had ever struck any of the materials that were used to build the room. And my job was literally to take a paper that arrived in one box, check it against another paper that arrived from the other box, check it, and put it in a third box.
What's the problem there? That sounds like really easy, dude. Like, pretty easy job.
Maybe it sounds easy to an artisanal pencil sharpener.
You know what? I challenge that one. Take that back. That's not a real burn.
You challenged that burn?
Yeah. That was not burn challenge.
I open it up to the audience. Was that a burn or not?
No.
What Jonathan Colton
Paul
said
is
to David
burn
Reese.
thirsty, and so he's just looking for burn.
I do have the burn lust, it's true. You know I'm at sea.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, so it's the shit that happens.
So wait, is the burn challenge upheld? Because that's the first burn challenge.
I retract my... Oh! Fatality!
But you're actually correct, David Reese. It was a fine job, and it paid benefits. Until the day that I decided that I wanted to put my coffee down in the spot where the third box was. So I moved the third box about 2 feet to the right on top of a filing cabinet. And I was called into the office the next day. And it was explained to me I had moved the box, and now how could the person who is going to check the paper after me possibly find that paper?
It's because there was no light in the room, you said. It was absolutely dark. I mean,
pitch dark. We were all Gollum-like inside of 2 months.
The blind man that was going to check.
Yes.
Got coffee and burned his fingers.
So it did require eye restoration afterwards.
Marion, worst job.
When I was young, I had a strong entrepreneurial spirit, and so I would frequently start businesses and walk around my neighborhood selling things to neighbors without my parents' permission. I think once I sold about 30 dozen muffins and cookies of my mom, like my favorite things my mom baked, and then I came home and told her that we were going to bake them.
Oh, you took pre-orders?
Yes, I took pre-orders. Yes, like Girl Scout cookies, except I wasn't in Girl Scouts. I think after that they let me join the Girl Scouts, after we baked all those. But because I was so just gung-ho to do things I was not quite old enough to do yet, I had several jobs in high school and middle school that I should not have had. And one of them was doing janitorial work for kind of a distant friend on the weekends. I would clean their office, and I was probably 14 or 15, so I was not quite old enough to thoroughly clean an office. I just didn't, wasn't that, I was much more interested in reading Victor Hugo. And so I would get distracted, I wouldn't do a very good job, and every week they would call me and shoot me out. And about a year or so later, as I got a little bit older, I took this class on American history and learned what a union was. And that I was probably, should not have been employed, and I was probably putting some poor folks out of work, and later on found out that I was sort of a very young pawn in a labor dispute that this company was going through. I was a 14-year-old child labor scab. And I couldn't even clean the toilets or clean the coffee thing, right? I mean, there's a lot of chemicals, and I didn't know which one was which.
You were the worst of the worst. Because, not to personalize it, but the reason what you did is so deplorable is because not only do you take a honest day's paycheck away from another person, you didn't even do your job. You didn't even do your job.
And I got yelled at.
Yeah, and it's not over. You're still going to get yelled at about this job you had.
And on a related note, if any of you need to outsource any labor, cheap. I am a musician, and I have very low standards. I will torture shit for way less than $75,000.
Hodgman, worst job.
Well, I love all of my weird old jobs and my cheesemongering and my ripping out pages of David Mamet plays and taping them down onto other pieces of paper for hours on end, because that involved book destruction. Ticket ripping at movie houses, and even the telemarketing, I got some stories out of it. Probably the worst job, just because it was such a headache, was owning that gold mine in Alaska. Just because the workers were such a pain in the neck to deal with. The most physically taxing and weirdest was traffic counting. When I went to college, someone's applauding traffic counting.
What is traffic counting?
Well, it may be difficult to understand from the name, so let me explain it to
you. Were you standing at a doorway with a clicker?
I appreciate that there's a lot of lingo, a lot of technical lingo involved. So when I arrived at Yale University with Jonathan Colton, that's September of 1989.
Is that its new name? Yale University with Jonathan.
Yale University featuring Jonathan Colton.
It was in his contract when he accepted matriculation.
I felt a great pride and happiness to be there, but also a kind of class shame. And so I'd always worked, and so I wanted to work again. And so I immediately went down to the bulletin board where they had jobs posted, and I picked traffic counting because it paid $12 an hour in 1989. That's not bad.
That's like $1,000 today.
It is, exactly so. And I met the woman at a cafe or a restaurant or something, and had my interview, and basically she said, "Okay, you're hired." And she handed me a clipboard which had a bunch of individual counters on it, like when you're going into a baseball court, when they count you as you go in, right? You know what I'm talking about, right?
Clickers.
All right. Or like when you're going into a comic book convention. Maybe you understand that. Clickers, and there were a bunch of them alongside of the clipboard, and then there was basically a pre-technology Excel spreadsheet. It was a piece of paper with graph paper, and she told me to go to an intersection in New Haven, and I would have 3 shifts from, I think from 7 to 9 in the morning, from noon to 2 in the afternoon, and from 5 to 7 in the evening. Go to the same intersection for those 2-hour shifts and count how many cars go straight, how many cars turn right, how many cars turn left, and then sometimes different intersections it got very confusing, like because there were extra places they could go, and I had to have an extra clicker over here, and it was really exciting. Yeah, right. Yeah, no, I was clicking like this. And the weird thing about it was I would get a call the night before and told which intersection to go to, and I would report to the intersection, and I would be
14th. Click.
Yeah.
I like that both of the jobs described as physically taxing involve thumb movements.
Well, those are the most physically taxing when you are sitting there without no, when you're sitting there with no stimulation and no movement and no real knowledge of why you're doing anything. So I would stand there, and it was getting into November, and it was very cold, and I'd wear 5 pairs of pants, and I'd sit there watching the cars go by, not knowing whether anyone was checking on me, why I was doing it. Finally, I went and I asked the woman, when she called me the next day to give me the intersection, why am I doing this? And she was like, I don't know. I think it's like to automate the traffic signals. I'm like, good enough. And sometimes they would pair me up with someone else, and we would sit. There was this one older guy, like in his 40s. We barely spoke, and we sat on crates in the 9th Square district of New Haven, which was 9 square blocks that the city of New Haven had taken by eminent domain to develop, and kicked everyone out about 30 years earlier. So now it was just 9, it was like a backlot of a movie studio, 9 empty square blocks where no one ever walked, never mind drove. And we just sat there in silence for 2 hours and 3 shifts. And it was exhausting, and it was cold. And only like 2 months ago, when I told this story to someone else, I realized this was not to automate traffic lights. This was a sick psychology experiment to see whether or not, how long it would take for me to realize that I was not being observed and simply make up things.
They also secretly gave you syphilis through the crate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's actually something that Yale University with Jonathan Colton does.
Yeah.
To haze the poor students and teach them where they belong in the scheme of things.
There's a reason you never got into stolen.
It was a sick Milgram experiment.
I'd like to point out also, I lived in New Haven in 1990, and there was quite a lot of gunfire.
Sure.
At that time, so maybe they were
If you're asking,
the safety of certain intersections.
If you're asking, was I packing heat? Obviously.
Yeah, it's actually very true. I lived on Daggett Street. I don't know if you know that neighborhood.
I counted that street.
Behind the hospital, and people used to drive by that building and test out their weapons. So the building that I lived in was riddled with marks of bullets and the shell casings along the sidewalks. It's a true story.
And you could collect those, melt them down, and sell them.
Yeah.
Sell them for scrap metal.
If you were industrious, I was not.
David Reese, what about your worst job?
Cleaning toilets. Raven, why did you ask that question? Do you have a bad job right now?
No, I'm not old enough for a job right now.
Must be nice.
B. Hart has a comment about that, don't you?
Yeah, I would say I didn't really start to be successful. I mean, I lived with all sorts of people, and eventually, like, oh yeah, I have to move in with my grandma, and that's great because she cooks, right, for me. But for a couple of years after I left college, I didn't really become successful at all until I realized, okay, I just have to do this. I was still trying to look for a job I maybe wouldn't hate, and it wasn't until I realized, all right, I have to do what I do, or I'll be doing what I do, like starving on the streets. It was when I finally gave in to that, I'm just going to go for it, and I'm just going to do it, and I'm going to stop trying to do this while I hunt for a job I don't hate.
Yeah, I mean, as bad as the traffic counting was, the worst job was the job I was doing once I realized I should be doing something else, what I should be doing with my life, be writing and performing. And so my worst job was being a literary agent, because it was very rewarding and fun, and I loved the people that I worked with, but it was a complete procrastination technique that lasted 7 years. And my clients knew it. May I ask you a question, Raven?
Sure.
Would you please remind me of the name of the provincial capital of Saskatchewan?
Regina.
I'm sorry, what?
Regina?
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Raven. Great question. Do we have time for a couple more questions? Do we have time for a couple more questions?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Speed round. Speed round.
I have a question. Will somebody give me a decaf coffee?
The answer is no.
Yeah.
Deploy a utility kilt.
And a full test coffee to go along with it, please. Awesome.
We have about 25 minutes.
Oh.
Sweet.
All right, let's
That's a
do
long question.
everybody's best job. Paul, what was your best job?